Avengers Doomsday is gonna be arguably the biggest movie of 2026, and today we're gonna make a fan poster for it. Stay tuned. Now, there have been quite a lot of takes on an Avengers Doomsday fan poster that I've seen online, and this is also what really drove me to make a poster of my own. I just really wanted to see my own take on this poster and see how it could turn out. Now, my main goal for making this poster is honestly to make a poster as close and accurate to the other Avengers posters as possible, or well, the last two of them at least. I really wanted to capture the grandiose scale that the previous two Avengers posters had, since, well, this movie's probably going to be on par with those in terms of scale and epicness. Now, this sounds great and all, but the reality is that I'm gonna have to put my ass to work for this one if I want to create something even slightly as cool and epic as the other Avengers posters. So let's just hope that the views I get from this video are gonna be worth it. Anyway, as usual, before I get into the editing part, I first have to break down the whole idea or concept behind the poster, so let's just go ahead and do that, shall we? The concept behind this poster is relatively simple. At the top, there's gonna be a side view of Doctor Doom with his cape that stretches down, and inside the cape there's gonna be the Avengers as if emerging from it. And also around the poster there's gonna be a bunch of planets, since, well, every other Avengers poster has those. And that's the whole concept. So now let's get to the part that you've been waiting for, the editing. This whole thing started by adding this picture of this cape, which I obviously removed the ugly white background and started warping the hell out of it. You're also probably wondering why there's this picture of Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom, and yeah, let's just ignore that for the moment. I duplicated the cape one more time, which I then put it behind and also made it a little bit darker as to sort of show the folding of the cape. I then dropped in the title of the movie, even though that should have been the first step, but we don't talk about that. Then it was finally time to add Doctor Doom at the top of the poster and also merge him with the cape. I found this image of Doctor Doom, which I know it's not our Doctor Doom, but don't worry, cause later on I would replace his face with the face of, well, Robert Downey Jr. It also appears that he's gonna be wearing a white suit in the movie, similar to the God Emperor Doom from the comics, as seen on some of the recent leaks that we got. But by the time those leaks were, well, leaked, I had already finished the poster, so let's just move on to the next thing. I also made the cape green to match the color of his suit. The background felt, well, a bit empty, so I decided to add this nebula image, which I then changed the color to green, and also I put it on color dodge blending mode, which gave this cool effect. Now here came the most exciting part, finally adding the Avengers. But here's the thing when it came to this. At first I only wanted to add characters that we knew for sure were going to be in the movie. That was so I can make a more accurate poster to, well, the movie. However, since we had very little information about the movie or who's gonna be playing in it, eventually I just decided to toss that whole idea away and just started adding a whole lot of characters that might or might not appear in the movie. Now, characters like Captain America, Doctor Strange and Thor were a no-brainer for a movie like this, so obviously they were the first ones to add. The Fantastic Four were also among one of the few characters to be confirmed to be in the movie, so I also had to add them too. Now, finding some even slightly decent images of them was literally the definition of torture. The only thing I could find of them were a bunch of fan art, so since I couldn't find anything better, I ended up using those. You're also gonna notice that they have different suits from the actual suits that they're gonna wear in the actual Fantastic Four movie, but that's because when I first started working on this poster, the trailer for Fantastic Four hadn't been released yet, so that's why. Let's just say for the purposes of this poster, they're gonna wear new suits for this movie. I then added a whole bunch of more characters that I thought are gonna be in the movie and immediately went to the next most important part, blending all these characters. So in other words, that just meant that a ton of shadows and highlights and other adjustments were needed just to make these characters look more decent and nice and, well, more acceptable, since most of the images that I found of these characters were just I'm gonna be honest here, blending these characters proved to be much more difficult than I anticipated, and I think that's mostly due to the fact that most of these images were just really poor in quality and also had terrible lighting. That became even more obvious when eventually later on I started replacing some of these characters with much better images that also had better quality and lighting, and everything started coming together real nice. As for the blending, there's really not much I can say here, as I just made these characters a bit darker, adjusted their color to green using color balance, and also added some green highlights to, well, all these characters. And yeah, I know they still look terrible, but for now that's what I did until I would come back much later on and would refine these characters more and just make them better. Then I decided to add the movie credits in the bottom since, well, every poster has those. And to do that, I literally just copied it from the endgame poster, and with some tweaking and adjusting around, it worked out real nice. I then moved on to the background, where I added a few more nebula images and also changed their color to green, and I'm not gonna lie, this really started improving the whole poster. Then some planets were set in place, and that's what I started doing. The process was pretty straightforward. I added a few planets, for which then I positioned them accordingly, and then from then on it was the blending as usual. As a last thing, I did add some glow around these planets, and that looked pretty nice. Then this is where I probably made one of the best decisions. I decided to add the Avengers logo in the background as a sort of overlay, which was obviously inspired by the endgame poster, which had a similar thing. To do that, I basically added the Avengers logo, made it green, and changed the blending mode to soft light. Now, I didn't achieve the same exact effect as the endgame poster, but it's nice enough, I guess. The logo also fit real nice since it sort of balanced the whole poster. After that was complete, I finally decided to replace the face of Doctor Doom with the face of Robert Downey Jr. since, well, we all know he's gonna be playing Doctor Doom in the movie. I found this image of Robert Downey Jr., which I gotta say, it wasn't the best image I could find, but it is what it is, I guess. I removed the background with the pen tool, for which then I placed him accordingly and started blending him in. A cool effect I thought I could also add was some green glow in his eyes to make him feel more cool and badass, I guess, and that looked pretty nice. As a last thing, some green highlights on his face were also a must, and well, there's our Doctor Doom. Now, since everything was sort of in place, I decided to add some nebula effects and overlays around and behind these characters, since the Infinity War poster also had those sort of effects. On top of that, I also decided to add some fog to just separate these characters more, but it wasn't until the end where I just realized that all of that looked trash, and it was sort of ruining the poster, so later on I would come back to it and fix it. To spice things up even more, I decided to add this lens flare in Captain America's shield, and yeah, that just felt like it was meant to be. It literally made everything a lot better. This is also where I got back to these characters and started replacing and adding a few more of them. No, I didn't mention this up to this point, but throughout this whole process, I went back and forth on adding Thor since I could never get satisfied with an image of him. I think I replaced him like 3 times until I finally found a definitive image that I liked. From then on, it was basically the same process as I did with literally all of the other characters. You know the drill, shadows, highlights, that sort of thing, so let's just move on to the next thing. Now this is where I decided to remove some of those nebula effects and the fog behind these characters that I added previously, just to, well, add those again, except this time I would do a better job than before. I even added some glow around these characters to just spice things up even more, and yeah, this made it 10 times better. I then decided to add this sort of smoke overlay in Doctor Doom's eye, and yeah, this really added for a more cool and badass effect. After that was complete, this is where I got this really cool idea to add a castle as a sort of Easter egg and reference to Latveria, since well, we're most likely gonna be seeing that in the movie. Now for those who don't know what Latveria is, it's pretty much the country that Doctor Doom rules over in the comics. Now I feel like I'm repeating myself at this point, but this is where I went back to these characters again for like the millionth time now and started well refining and adjusting all of them. One of the things that I did here was add some shadows around these characters, since even though I tried to add those way early in the process, for some reason it just didn't really look that nice, so this is where I decided to give it another shot, and yeah, this time I actually got a satisfying result. I also thought it would work out better if the cape sort of faded with the background, and well, I made short work of that. I used some fog brushes on a really low flow and started painting on a mask around the areas that I wanted the cape to fade in. Another thing which I did here was to add this mountain image on the right side of the poster, since well, that part seemed quite empty, and since we already had the castle on the left as a nod to Latveria, I just thought it would be perfect to add some sort of mountain on the right, since well, Latveria is a very mountainous country. From here on, it was pretty much just adding the finer little touches such as lens flares, subtle glow around these characters, and so on. As a last thing, I added the camera raw filter, which obviously made everything 10 times better, and well, here I present to you the Avengers Doomsday, since well, they have a lot of effects in them too. I also added one more planet on the top right of the poster, since I just thought there's a place for another planet, so why not? And another thing which I did was add the actors' names on the top of the poster, since well, every poster has those. I did a few more things which I'm not really gonna get into, since I don't want to make this video any longer than it currently is. But now, as for the actual final results, I gotta say I'm pretty happy with it. Now, whether or not this poster is on par with the other Avengers posters, personally I don't think so, but I'll let you judge for yourself. Other than that, this poster took me around 16 hours to complete, which is beyond crazy because I don't even think it should have taken that long. But either way, it's hands down my biggest project yet, and I think it just shows. But with all of that being said, I guess that wraps this video for today. If you have enjoyed it, be very much free to leave a like, share, comment and subscribe, and I guess I'll see you in the next one.